a lantern in the middle of a storm. Not a fragile glass that risks shattering, but a steady flame that refuses to die. Light has this paradox. It comforts those who are lost, and at the same time, it attracts what would consume it. Moths circle it, but so do wolves. For men who feel deeply, men often called empaths, this image is not poetry. It is autobiography. There is a certain ache you might recognize, being drawn into connections that begin as recognition and end as erosion. A woman leans close, and you sense her need, her longing, her fracture. Your nervous system answers, "I can carry this." That same response that makes you trustworthy also makes you a target. Because where there is warmth, there is always someone cold who wishes to stand near the fire without ever feeding it. Jung would describe part of this as projection. Pieces of yourself, your unacknowledged hunger, your hidden wounds, are carried outside and placed onto the figure before you. You do not simply see her need. You see your own shadow mirrored in her, and in the act of trying to save her, you are trying to save the younger, fractured parts of yourself. That is why the bond feels magnetic. It is also why it can become dangerous. Modern biology gives another lens. Oxytocin, the hormone that bonds parent to child, does not discriminate between safe and unsafe attachment. Dopamine, the chemical of anticipation, binds you to intermittent reward. When someone alternates between flooding you with affection and withdrawing it, your body interprets that as urgency, not abuse. The very chemistry that builds devotion in secure love can also weld you into a trauma bond. And then there are the tactics, subtle, often invisible, until years later. Gaslighting that erodes your sense of reality. Love bombing followed by sudden coldness. A cycle of reinforcement that conditions you to doubt yourself, to chase what should be calmly offered. These patterns are not random. They are strategies, conscious or unconscious, by those who take empathy as open doors rather than guarded gates. So the arc of this journey matters. Across the next chapters, we will walk through 3 layers. First, naming the predators you don't see, not as caricatures but as patterns of behavior and chemistry. Second, uncovering the wound inside, the invisible invitation that says, "Exploit me, and I will stay." And finally, the practices, measurable tests, boundaries that can be spoken in one sentence, rituals that re-anchor your nervous system until peace no longer feels like boredom, but like home. Pause here for a moment before the instruction begins. Think of one repeated scene in your life, the moment you kept returning even when your body said no. Maybe it was late-night phone calls that left you empty by dawn. Maybe it was a look that promised devotion if you only tried harder. The repetition itself is the evidence. Addiction and duty blur. It feels impossible to name where care ends and compulsion begins. That is the territory we are entering. We will use Jung's language of shadow and projection, the clinical clarity of attachment and neuroendocrine science, and the grounded tact of practical boundaries. Not for theory's sake, but so that the lantern you carry can remain what it is meant to be, steady, visible, unconsumed. So the invitation is simple. Walk with me through these patterns, not to find villains, but to recover sovereignty. Each chapter will leave you with something you can test tonight. No leaps of faith, no promises of instant rescue, just the slow work of seeing clearly, testing wisely, and protecting the light that is already yours. Now, let us begin with the first chapter, the lantern and the wolf. Imagine again that lantern in the storm. To a lost traveler, it means safety. To a hungry wolf, it means prey. The same flame carries both meanings depending on who approaches. For many men who identify with empathy and deep attunement, this paradox becomes their daily life. The very quality that makes you trustworthy can mark you as accessible. There is a quiet assumption many men carry, that being available, generous, and endlessly patient will naturally protect them. The belief whispers, "If I am kind enough, no harm will come." Yet generosity without boundary is often read not as strength, but as consent. What feels like safety inside your chest may read as permission to someone else's hunger. That is the hidden trap, confusing your openness with immunity. Jung would describe this as the play of projection. When you meet another person's need, what you often touch is not just their wound, but your own. In Jungian terms, the anima and animus, The inner feminine and masculine images seek mirrors outside of us. So a man may see neediness in a partner and feel compelled to rescue, not realizing he is gazing into the reflection of his own shadow. This is not weakness. It is the unconscious attempt to heal by reenacting. You believe you are helping her, when in truth you are reenacting the unresolved dialogue with your own neglected parts. Here lies a counterintuitive truth. More openness does not always mean more safety. When the attachment system is dysregulated, when the nervous system is primed by early abandonment or enmeshment, greater availability can increase vulnerability. It is like leaving every door in the house unlocked, believing it proves your good heart, when in reality it exposes your unguarded rooms. There is a way to test this dynamic, rather than theorize about it. Begin by mapping your pattern. For 30 days, keep a record of who you help, what you give, and what you receive in return. Not as judgment, but as data. Then introduce one sentence of boundary. Repeat it 3 times across those days. Something as simple as, "I need to pause here and revisit tomorrow." Finally, record the outcome. Did intimacy deepen, or was it exploited? Over a month, the evidence will speak more clearly than your guilt or your longing. If this feels abstract, cinema often gives us metaphors that stick. Think of the archetype of the caregiver in noir or anti-hero films. The man who pours his strength into someone who drains rather than replenishes. He believes his giving proves his worth, but by the final act, it is clear. He has been feeding a vampiric figure, mistaking exhaustion for love. That is the lantern and wolf dynamic dressed in story. Beneath it all lives a deeper wound. The rescuing impulse often grows from childhood conditions, hyper-responsibility born from being parentified, or early abandonment that left you equating worth with being needed. In Jungian language, this is shadow meeting archetype, the hero mask concealing the orphan's cry. You believe you are saving someone else, but the compulsion is to prove you deserve to be saved long ago. Notice what this reveals. Helping does not always protect. Sometimes it marks you. Sometimes the very act of giving without pause becomes the signal predators use to enter. This is not to say generosity is wrong. It is to say generosity without discernment is a gamble with your energy. Here is the paradox to carry with you. Your strength is real, but without boundary, it can become the script of your undoing. Empathy without discernment is not protection, it is exposure. So consider this image. You think you are shielding another with your care, yet to a predator, your openness is not a shield, but a sign. One rule, practiced tonight, can shift that pattern. One measurable test will show you the unseen shape of your giving. The question is not whether you are kind enough. The question is whether your kindness is guarded by sovereignty. In the next chapter, we turn to the other side of the equation. Not your openness, but the predator's strategy. Gaslighting, love bombing, and the slow coil of control. Some wounds do not arrive with claws bared. They arrive with flowers in their hands. What makes the most skilled manipulator difficult to detect is not the violence, but the devotion. The intensity of love bombing, grand declarations, relentless attention, sudden intimacy, feels like a balm. For a nervous system that has craved recognition, the flood of affirmation feels like homecoming. Yet hidden inside that wave is a withdrawal waiting to happen. Here lies the confusion. When the warmth suddenly turns cold, most men assume it is their failure. If she pulled away, I must have done something wrong. But inconsistency is not always evidence of your fault. Sometimes it is evidence of a deliberate pattern. A predator does not simply withdraw. They withdraw after flooding you with affirmation, so that your body links craving with their approval. The rhythm is designed to erode your certainty and increase your pursuit. This is the anatomy of gaslighting and intermittent reinforcement. Gaslighting is not simply lying. It is the steady dismantling of your confidence in your own memory. It is the phrase, "that never happened," repeated until you doubt the evidence of your senses. Intermittent reinforcement is not random cruelty. It is the same principle that keeps gamblers at the slot machine. Reward delivered unpredictably creates the strongest compulsion to return. Together, these mechanisms manufacture doubt, not just about them, but about you. The counterintuitive truth is this: the predator's goal is not simply to be adored, it is to be needed. Dependence is the prize. By alternating between intensity and neglect, between adoration and dismissal, They train your system to cling even more tightly. This is why leaving can feel harder than staying. Your body interprets separation not as freedom, but as starvation. There are ways to interrupt this cycle, not with willpower alone, but with structure. First, the reality ledger. Keep a date-stamped record of conversations, promises, and contradictions. It may feel tedious, but reality documented is reality defended. Second, the mirror check. Introduce a third-party verification rule. 2 witnesses or 2 messages that confirm events before you concede to self-doubt. And third, the time-boxed withdrawal. Step back for 48 to 72 hours with a sensory regulation routine. Walks, breathwork, trusted connection outside the bond. This is not abandonment, it is recalibration. Consider the story of a man who finally regained his orientation. He was entangled with someone who alternated between praise and scorn. His memories blurred, he doubted every response. So he began keeping a simple external log, not secret, not embellished, just times, words, promises. When confusion returned, he showed the notes to a trusted friend. The clarity was undeniable. Within weeks, he no longer argued about who was right. The record spoke. His nervous system stopped chasing correction and began to stabilize around reality. Beneath these tactics lies another shadow. Gaslighting often reactivates an older wound. The child who grew up under conditional validation. When love was granted only if you pleased, inconsistency becomes strangely familiar. The predator exploits not just your present openness, but your history of doubting your own worth. It is not just manipulation, it is reenactment. Notice the trap. The fear of losing control makes you grip tighter. Yet the tighter you grip, the more you lose yourself. The truth is sharper. Control here is an illusion. The only restoration of control comes not through argument but through evidence. Documented facts, mirrored witnesses, time-limited withdrawal. These are the quiet tools that restore sovereignty. So pause here. The next time you feel yourself spiraling in argument, remember this. Stop debating memory. Collect evidence instead. The ledger will not love bomb you. The witness will not withdraw. Facts do not seduce, but they steady. And steadiness is the antidote to the slow coil of control. In the next chapter, we will descend deeper into the body itself. Why your attachment can feel indistinguishable from addiction, the neurochemistry of trauma bonds, and why love and craving can masquerade as the same thing. There is a particular confusion that haunts men who feel deeply, the inability to tell the difference between devotion and dependency. When you think of her, your body aches the way it would for a substance denied. When she returns, the relief is not only emotional, it is chemical. This is why trauma bonding so often feels like love. The same systems that reward closeness can just as easily chain you to danger. Trauma bonding is not romance gone wrong. It is a conditioned loop of reward and punishment. At its center are oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin, the hormone of trust and bonding, has a paradox. It does not distinguish between healthy and harmful relationships. It simply deepens attachment wherever repeated contact occurs. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation, fuels craving not when rewards are steady, but when they are unpredictable. Together, they can weld a man to someone who harms him, all while convincing him that separation is betrayal. This is why leaving a toxic bond feels less like walking away from fire and more like detoxing from a drug. The body interprets distance as deprivation. The heart accelerates, sleep breaks, thoughts loop endlessly. It is not weakness. It is the body doing exactly what it has been trained to do, cling to the source of chemical release. The counterintuitive truth is that the same hormones that soothe in safety can enslave in chaos. Oxytocin, in a secure bond, creates grounding and calm. In a harmful bond, it reinforces loyalty to someone who undermines you. Dopamine, in purposeful pursuit, fuels discipline and achievement. In trauma bonding, it cements craving for a love that never fully arrives. What feels like devotion is often hijacked chemistry. There are ways to recalibrate, and they begin with interrupting cycles. First, break contact for 48 to 72 hours. In that gap, replace the absence with regulated forms of connection, exercise, deep breathing, community rituals. This is not simply distraction. It is reteaching your nervous system that oxytocin can be sourced from safety, not just from danger. Second, re-anchor with predictable, non-romantic increments. 2 sessions of physical exertion a week with peers, or rituals of trust among men who hold you accountable. Each act deposits oxytocin without risk. 3rd, measure yourself. Track cravings against hours awake, mood across the days. As the weeks pass, you will notice drops in compulsion, not because you willed yourself into freedom, but because the chemistry itself is shifting. One man described how his nights were swallowed by late calls with someone who alternated warmth and cruelty. The emptiness each dawn was unbearable. He replaced those calls with a gym session and one accountability conversation with a friend. By the 3rd week, his cravings diminished. The ache was not erased, but it weakened. He discovered his body could learn new rhythms. The loyalty that had felt like destiny was revealed as habit, and habits can change. Beneath this lies another archetypal wound, the seeker who confuses trauma repetition with intimacy. Early attachment insecurity trains him to prize availability over reciprocity, to cling to whoever is present, even if presence costs him his peace. This is the wound beneath the craving. Not hunger for her, but hunger for the mother's gaze, the father's steady hand. When the past is unhealed, the present becomes its reenactment. The revelation here is not shameful, it is liberating. Your brain is not betraying you. It has been hijacked by chemistry, and what is hijacked can be reclaimed. When cravings drop after hours of sleep, after a run, after a moment of validation from safe peers, you are witnessing biology shift, not magic, biology. Carry this truth. You are not addicted to her. You are addicted to the chemistry her inconsistency produces in you. The bond is real, but it is not love. It is an echo of wounds and a loop of neurotransmitters. And just as it was learned, it can be unlearned. In the next chapter, we will move from chemistry to mirror, how your shadow becomes someone else's map, and why the partners you choose may not be bad luck at all, but projection replaying itself in plain sight. Patterns repeat, not because fate conspires against you, but because the unconscious seeks mirrors. Many men describe the feeling of meeting the same partner in different bodies. The faces change, but the cycle remains. What looks like bad luck is often projection, your inner world scripting the characters who enter your life. Projection, in Jung's terms, is the act of placing disowned parts of yourself onto another. If you condemn dishonesty in a partner, it is worth asking, where in your life do you conceal truths? If you rage at another's neediness, what part of you is starving to be cared for? The unconscious does not tolerate vacancy. What is denied inside will appear outside, carrying the costume of another person. The error is believing that each repetition is coincidence, that the liar, the abandoner, the manipulator simply appeared at random. But when the same story unfolds multiple times, the common thread is not them, it is the projection field. It is the pattern seeking expression until it is seen. Here is the counterintuitive insight. The traits you judge most fiercely in others are often the traits you perform unconsciously under stress. The mirror does not lie. The man who insists she is manipulative may notice, in quieter moments, how he bends truth to avoid conflict. The one who says she is always cold may discover how he withholds affection when fear rises. Projection is not about blame, it is about retrieval. What you condemn outside is often the fragment you have not welcomed inside. There is a way to test this gently. Begin by writing down recurring words you use to describe ex-partners. Selfish, distant, chaotic, whatever repeats. For 1 week, keep a journal of where those same behaviors show up in you, even in small or neutral contexts. Perhaps you withdraw at work. Perhaps you manipulate through silence with family. Then, name the inner voice behind it. Is it the frightened child? The shamed adolescent? Give it a title. Finally, experiment with one substitution. Instead of withdrawal, a sentence of honesty. Instead of silence, a boundary spoken calmly. The mirror is not a punishment, it is a map. Across myth, mirrors carry archetypal weight. Think of Narcissus, trapped by his reflection, unable to separate image from self. Or the myths of the double, the doppelganger who reveals hidden impulses. In these stories, the reflection is not evil, it is unfinished. The danger comes not from seeing the shadow, but from refusing to recognize it. Beneath the repetition lies a wound. Many men carry disavowed aggression or assertiveness, impulses punished in childhood. To survive, they learn to suppress those qualities, only to later project them onto partners. The partner becomes too much or too demanding, while inside, the unacknowledged fire smolders. Until that fire is reclaimed, it will keep appearing outside, dressed in the faces of others. So pause and ask, what if the liar you fear is the part of you that lies to yourself about what you need? What if the distance you condemn in her is the distance you maintain from your own anger? When patterns repeat, it is not always because you attract the wrong people. Sometimes, it is because you are attracting your own shadow, waiting to be integrated.
Carry this image. The mirror that does not flatter. The mirror that does not lie. It does not punish. It reflects. The choice is not whether projection occurs. It always does. The choice is whether you remain its prisoner or become its interpreter. In the next chapter, we will turn to energy itself, how giving without limits transforms strength into drain, and why discipline without boundary becomes surrender. Strength is often imagined as endless capacity.
A man who never tires, never refuses, never bends. Culture rewards this myth, and many men live inside it until the body collapses or the spirit empties. What looks like invincibility on the surface is, in truth, a slow leak. Energy given without measure does not prove love. It erodes purpose. The hidden dynamic is this. Many men confuse masculine duty with emotional invulnerability. They believe that saying yes to every demand proves worth, that carrying others without pause demonstrates honor. But when strength is defined only as availability, it becomes indistinguishable from surrender. A life lived in constant rescue ceases to be sovereign. It becomes reactive, tethered to the needs of others. Psychology offers a frame for this erosion. Ego identity often attaches itself to external validation. When others approve, the man feels whole. When others disapprove, he feels fractured. This is the Pygmalion effect, the expectation of others shaping behavior until you perform the identity they assign. Over time, the man's self is no longer self-generated, but borrowed from the gaze around him. Here lies a counterintuitive truth. Boundaries are not the opposite of strength. They are its amplifier. A sword never drawn is useless. A sword never sheathed is broken. To preserve power, limits must exist. Without them, what looks like discipline is merely depletion. Consider a method of reclaiming energy through structure. Begin with a simple ledger, one page divided into 2 columns. On one side, what you give this week. On the other, what you refuse. Not as moral judgment, but as calibration. Next, conduct a 24-hour experiment. Decline one request that normally drains you. Observe the physiological response. The racing heart, the tight chest, the guilt that rises. Then, complete the cycle with a recovery ritual. 10 minutes of vagal regulation. Slow exhalations. Grounding breath, orienting your eyes to safe objects in the room. In this sequence, refusal does not end in shame, it ends in calm. There is a story of a man who lived in constant emergency. Every week brought another demand from colleagues, family, partners. He never said no. His calendar was proof of devotion, but his life was hollow. He began by refusing one urgent request each week. At first, guilt nearly consumed him. But as hours returned, he discovered something radical. His attention could be spent on projects aligned with his purpose, not on crises that proved his usefulness. Refusal became not coldness, but reclamation. Beneath this pattern lies an archetype, the martyr or rescuer, often born from paternal expectation or from the reward of caretaking in childhood. A boy praised only when selfless grows into a man who fears boundaries as betrayal. His worth fuses with being needed. Yet the cost is identity drained of sovereignty. Here is the provocation. What if strength is not proven by what you carry, but by what you refuse to carry? What if one refusal opens the quiet you have been chasing in every act of compliance? The rebellion is simple. Say no once, and measure the calm it creates. Carry this truth. Energy is finite. Without boundary, it bleeds. With boundary, it focuses. A man who gives without limit will one day wake emptied. A man who conserves with discernment will have something to give that endures. In the next chapter, we gather these strands into practice. From predators to gatekeepers, the rules that protect your light and transform empathy into sovereignty. Every man who carries light must learn to guard it, not with walls so high that no one enters, but with gates that discern. The shift from prey to sovereign comes when empathy is paired with rules. Not vague ideals, but operational boundaries that can be practiced and measured. Think of these as gateposts. 5 non-negotiables that determine whether someone is allowed closer to your light. Communication that remains clear rather than evasive. Reality that is documented, not denied. Time that is tested within limits, not stretched indefinitely. Witness that confirms, not isolates. Reciprocity that balances, not drains. These are not aspirations, they are metrics. When one or more of these pillars collapse, the gate closes. The philosophical backbone here draws from Machiavellian prudence and Nietzschean sovereignty. Strategy is not manipulation, it is conservation of telos, your purpose, your direction. Scarcity is part of this, not scarcity as punishment, but as diagnostic. Limiting your availability is not cruelty. It reveals who reciprocates and who simply consumes. If the bond deepens when you withdraw slightly, trust grows. If it collapses, you have your answer. A monthly audit can anchor this practice. First, score reciprocity, the ratio between what you give and what you receive. Second, run a vulnerability safety check. Are your disclosures met with validation or exploitation? Third, create an upgrade plan, 2 actions to increase safety in the month ahead. This turns relationship assessment from guesswork into structure. Community deepens this further. No man guards his light alone. Build 2 trusted witnesses, male peers who know your patterns and can confirm when your discernment falters. A predator thrives in secrecy. Accountability dissolves that secrecy. Underneath these rules lies another shadow. Many men avoid sovereignty because they fear it will cost them love. The wound whispers, if you are strong, you will be abandoned. Boundaries feel like exile. But in truth, it is the lack of boundaries that ensures abandonment, because unguarded energy eventually burns out and drives connection into collapse. So remember this anchor. A sovereign man protects his light with rules, not with walls. The rules are private, the code you live by. They are not for public display, but for inner alignment. In time, they transform empathy from exposure into guidance. Carry this forward. Authority and humanity are not opposites. To guard your light is not to harden, it is to shine steadily without depletion, to be seen not because you bend endlessly, but because you stand with clarity. Now we arrive at the closing, where all these strands converge. Your light is not fragile glass, nor a trophy to be won. It is a lighthouse, fixed, serviced, visible. Its purpose is not to be rescued, but to guide. When storms rise, the lighthouse does not chase the ships. It simply holds its beam, steady, unwavering. That is the image to carry into your own life. 3 keystones emerge from this journey. First, see the projection and the wound. Recognize how your shadow invites repetition. Second, test every relationship with time-bound, concrete metrics: ledger, audit, reciprocity score. Third, regulate your biology through substitution and ritual. Move chemistry from compulsion to choice, from hijack to anchor. From here, the challenge is immediate and simple. Choose 1 rule from the gatekeeper's code. Apply 1 test from the patterns we've named, whether 72 hours of withdrawal, a journal of projection, or a reciprocity measure. Record the outcome. Let reality, not fantasy, speak. Healing is not punishment. It is repatterning, not forcing yourself to resist, but training a nervous system to recognize safety. Every boundary, every ritual, every witness is part of that repatterning. You are not failing when you stumble. You are rewiring. This is not about willpower alone. It is about building a body and a psyche that no longer confuse chaos with love. The lantern remains lit. The question is no longer whether predators exist. It is whether your light will remain sovereign, guided by rules that conserve it. When you carry your light as a lighthouse, you do not fear the wolves. You stand steady, and the steady beam itself becomes protection.